The Mark of the Rani is possibly the most traditional story in season 22 of Doctor Who. No crazy sci-fi worlds, no over-the-top violence, just a rogue Time Lord meddling in human history. The kind of story we've had since, well, the Time Meddler. It makes for a nice change of pace and is quite a decent watch. The setting is very impressive, a northern English town in the early 1800s, surrounded by picturesque scenery and with crowds of dirty villagers. The accents are a bit all over the place. I'm from the general area myself and I couldn't understand what half the characters are saying, so anyone from another part of the country or a different country would have had great difficulty. The mining theme of the season continues. Attack of the Cybermen had humans mining on Telos. Vengeance on Varos was all about a mining planet, and this one is set around a coal mine. It's like Bad Wolf 20 years too early, only without any payoff. The Doctor and Perry have by now settled into a kind of brother-sister relationship, arguing and bickering, but with an underlying affection beneath it all. Perry even gets a brief moment of characterisation, as she shows her concerns about how the environment will change in the coming centuries, so it's good to see her starting to develop a personality. George Stevenson is the big historical character they meet, played by Gordon Granger, but it's not really a celebrity historical, as he doesn't have a massive amount to do. Frankly, the story would have worked just as well without him. Terence Alexander as Lord Ravensworth has a much bigger role, and it turns out that he was also a real person. I guess it leaves room for a sequel, where aliens try to stop Stevenson from developing the rocket. Technically, that could still happen, and Gordon Granger is still alive, but he is 87 years old, so it's possible they may have to recast the part. The Rani makes her debut here, disguised as an old woman, in order to lure men into her bathhouse and experiment on them. They come out completely clean the other end, so presumably she must bathe them herself. Once she's finished with them, they end up with big red circles on their necks, hence the title, and they start smashing up machinery like the Luddites did. I don't know if the implication is that all of the Luddites were really just victims of the Rani. That seems a bit of a stretch, but there's clearly meant to be some sort of connection. Kate O'Mara gives a strong performance. I seem to remember she goes a bit over the top in her future appearances, but she's fine here. Ruthless and amoral, but doing it all for scientific knowledge rather than power. It certainly distinguishes her from some of the other rogue Time Lords we've seen, and it wouldn't be a bad idea if the character came back in the current series. People have theorised that she has already returned, played by Anita Dobson, a character who starts out seeming like a harmless old woman, but later reveals that she's far more than she seems, which is basically what the Rani does in this story. The Master also shows up, perhaps superfluously. He doesn't have a lot to do, apart from disguise himself as a scarecrow for no reason, and spends most of the time just being a Rani's sidekick. He plans to kidnap all of the 19th century geniuses and use them to take over the world, but he gets absolutely nowhere towards completing this goal. Really, they should have let the Rani face the Doctor on her own and leave the return of the Master for another time. There are some impressive action scenes, with Colin Baker doing all of his own stunts, which he mentions in just about every interview. It definitely adds to the realism when you see him dangling from a chain above a deep pit, or hurtling down the street tied to a trolley. It's the sort of thing that John Pertwee used to do, and it certainly suits the character more than the excessive violence of more recent stories. The second half of the story is mainly based around a minefield that turns anyone who steps on one of the mines into a tree. I'm not sure how that works scientifically, but Time Lords are more advanced than us, so maybe it makes sense to them. The scene where the tree comes to life and grabs Perry is unintentionally hilarious, and kind of takes away from the horror of being turned into a tree if you can still move your branches at will. Maybe with enough effort you could even walk around, like Ents from Lord of the Rings. But it does lead to some tense scenes, with the Rani leading Perry to safety, and the Doctor escaping from being suspended over one of the mines. The Rani's TARDIS is an impressive set. It's not just the usual TARDIS set painted a different colour. They've really made an effort this time. It's packed full of exciting details, from the spinning device in the centre to the plinths full of embryos dotted around the place. I don't remember if they bring it back for Time and the Rani, but they definitely should have. At the end, the Master and the Rani are trapped in there with a model dinosaur, but both of them come back very soon, so it can't have caused them too much bother. This is Pip and Jane Baker's first script for the show. It may well be their best, but that's not saying much. Their distinctive dialogue style is already apparent, full of quotations from Shakespeare and excessive use of ornate vocabulary, with lines such as unfortunate, fortuitous would be a more apposite epithet, But there's also room for lines such as, "Don't move, the tree won't hurt you," which is unintentionally hilarious. The DVD has more than an hour of extras. There's even more on the Blu-ray, but I'll do a video on those after I've seen the whole of the season. Lords and Luddites is a long 43-minute documentary on the making of the story, featuring all of the cast and crew, including Kate O'Mara before her death, and Pip and Jane Baker before their deaths, so it feels very comprehensive. There's 8 minutes of deleted scenes, mainly just extra snippets from the existing scenes. Now and then shows you what Bliss Hill looks like nowadays. Basically the same because it's a period town created for a museum. The YouTuber Paul Who did a video a few months ago where he visited the site himself, so I'll put a link to that in the description. Playing with Fire is all about the composer and how he did the music, and there's a clip from Blue Peter, where Peter Purvis tells you all about the history of Ironbridge Gorge Museum. It's a shame they couldn't have used the bridge in Doctor Who, as it looks very impressive. Overall, it's a great looking story with a very convincing period setting, and Kate O'Mara makes a strong debut as the Rani, but the second half gets a bit silly. I'll give it 7 out of 10. Next week, The Two Doctors, which is a bit of a guilty pleasure. A lot of fans hate it, but I think it's quite fun. So press subscribe and you'll get to find out what I think of it now, and I'll see you next time.